The blood drained from Brittany Hale's face when she saw the bold name printed on the first-class ticket the man held out. Andre Lawson. It matched the employee badge peeking out of his leather wallet. In that moment, her heart dropped straight into her stomach. The man she had just humiliated in front of a crowd was no ordinary passenger. He was the new CEO of Aurora Airways, the very airline recently acquired by Ether Air. 6 minutes earlier, she had been the untouchable flight attendant, the name everyone deferred to. Now her decade-long career trembled like a sandcastle before a breaking wave. The scene triggered a chain reaction of shock. Passengers froze in place. Several phones lifted quietly. A hush fell over gate C22, as if the entire airport held its breath. Brittany tried to maintain a stiff smile, but her lips quivered like peeling paint. Her eyes, once sharp at reading customers, now only saw a figure beyond her control. Andre Lawson, 45, did not need $1,000 suit or an entourage at his side. He stood there in a simple, dark blue shirt and dark jeans, yet the stillness in his eyes carried the weight of the sky. No shouting, no displays of authority. Just a calm, so absolute it terrified Brittany more than any storm of anger. 6 minutes had passed, minutes that had seemed ordinary, but now marked the line between survival and ruin in Brittany's career. In those 6 minutes, she had imposed bias, wielding her small power to insult a passenger she thought did not belong in first class. In those 6 minutes, Andre Lawson had stood patient, enduring the humiliation as if conducting a cold test. And in those 6 minutes, the balance of power shifted completely. Brittany swallowed hard, her throat dry as sand. She remembered the years past, how many times she escaped scrutiny through connections with former CEO Victor Lang. How many complaints against her vanished from the record. She once believed she was the exception, untouchable. But now, as Colin Park, the veteran gate manager, stared at her in panic as whispers rippled through the crowd. That's Lawson, the Ether CEO. She knew the walls protecting her had collapsed. And Andre, in those 6 minutes, he was not just a passenger. He was a man who had lived through every doubtful glance, every extra check demanded, just because of his skin color or his plain clothes. The memories surged back. The time he was stopped while working as a baggage handler. The time he was asked, "Are you sure this ticket is yours?" after an upgrade on a business trip. What happened at gate C22 was not new. It was an old wound reopened, a reminder of why he chose to travel in silence. Each second, the air thickened. Officer Patel stood frozen, knowing the documents were in perfect order, but unwilling to defy a veteran attendant. Colin Park clutched his clipboard, his eyes meeting Andre's and halting there, as if looking at a mountain rising in the terminal. "There is no issue at all, Mr. Lawson. I will personally escort you onto the plane." His voice rasped with strain. Brittany faltered. The world exploded inside her head. She tried to reason. Maybe it's just someone with the same name. But when Colin whispered, "Stephanie, do you know who this is? This man just bought our airline." Every illusion crumbled. Andre gave a slight nod to Colin, then walked past Brittany. He did not need to scold. His silence was the sharpest blade. Behind him, she heard the whispers. That's him. My God. What was she thinking? Invisible knives pierced the pride she once thought unshakable. In 6 minutes, Andre Lawson had let her expose herself completely. In 6 minutes, Brittany Hale had dismantled her own facade. And in 6 minutes, a lesson was written not only for one attendant, but for an entire airline. True power never needs to boast. It only waits for the right moment to turn the entire game upside down. Andre stepped into the jet bridge, his watch reading exactly 6 minutes since he had approached the counter. 6 minutes, brief in the stream of time, but enough to shift a career, enough to shift a culture. Behind him, Brittany collapsed to her knees, clutching the counter edge like a drowning soul clinging to driftwood. In her head, only one thought pounded with every heartbeat. I just destroyed my entire life in 6 minutes. The light in the first-class cabin softened as Andre Lawson settled into seat 2A. He opened his tablet, pretending to read documents, but his mind drifted into the past. The 6 minutes that had just unfolded were not merely an incident. They were a mirror reflecting the path he had walked, a path that began at the very bottom of the airline industry. The baggage hold. 26 years ago, at O'Hare Airport, a 19-year-old black man named Andre wore an oversized uniform, his hands calloused, his every step scrutinized. Each time he passed through security, he was stopped, asked to show his ID again, as if his very presence was suspicious. Back then, he had nothing but an employee badge, a battered luggage cart, and one unshakable belief. If I want to change this industry, I have to start from the place where it disrespects me most. He remembered the freezing night shifts, dragging bags twice his weight. He remembered the way passengers looked straight through him as if he were invisible. But in that invisibility, he learned something vital. This system ran because of people, not just metal and engines. Every flight that took off was powered by the sweat and tears of thousands behind the scenes. Over the years, Andre worked while studying nights at college. His notebooks worn thin, his textbooks faintly printed, but he wrote down every line with care. When friends went out partying, he stayed in the library. When co-workers collapsed after their shifts, he kept studying economics by the dim light. No one believed the baggage handler would succeed. But Andre believed, and that belief hardened with time like steel forged in fire. By the age of 30, he was promoted to ground operations manager. That was when he began drawing attention, not just as a man who got the job done, but as one who cared about every employee. When passengers complained, he did not just handle incidents. He listened, he remembered, he turned small stories into data to push for policy change. Gradually, a philosophy took root. An airline is only as good as how it treats its people. At 35, Andre stepped into the executive boardroom for the first time. Still in the same old shoes, but carrying a mind sharpened by sweat and sacrifice. He listened as executives argued about aircraft, assets, stock value. Few mentioned people. Andre sat quietly, writing down every word. Inside him, a fire ignited. One day, I will sit at the head of this table, and when I do, people will no longer be forgotten. At 40, he was officially appointed CEO of Ether Air, from baggage handler to chief executive officer, a journey the press called the American miracle. But to Andre, it was no miracle. It was the result of perseverance, of nights spent self-studying, of swallowing countless slights and indignities. Most of all, it was proof that real power does not live in a business card, but in the ability to see value where others refuse to look. 3 weeks ago, Ether Air completed the acquisition of Aurora Airways, a company crippled by poor management and a toxic culture. The deal expanded the fleet by 30%, added 16 international routes, and Wall Street cheered. But Andre did not. He knew that gold plating over rust still left rust beneath. He needed truth, and truth was not in reports or praise. It was in the moment a flight attendant looked into a passenger's eyes and decided whether they were worthy to sit in a seat they had paid for. Today, that moment arrived. Brittany Hale, the embodiment of the old culture, revealed it all in just a few words, and Andre, through silence alone, recorded data more valuable than any report. He leaned back in his seat, his hand gripping the armrest. Outside the window, an Airbus still bearing Aurora's silver paint waited for takeoff. Soon it would wear the red and gold of Ether. But Andre knew paint was only the surface. What he sought to change was the heart of the organization, so that no one, regardless of skin color or clothes they wore, would be treated as an intruder on the very flight they had paid to board. The moment Brittany coldly stopped him was not the first time he had been dismissed. But perhaps it would be the last time Aurora Airways dared repeat that mistake. Because this time, the suspicious passenger was the new owner. In another corner of Chicago, as dawn cast its amber glow across the rooftops, Brittany Hale, 38, stood before the mirror. Her uniform was pressed to perfection, the navy blue fabric reflecting a cold sheen. Every crease smoothed as though she were wearing an invisible suit of armor. Her blonde hair was tied high and tight, her lipstick a precise shade of pink, eyeliner drawn with clinical precision. No detail out of place, no angle left unchecked. Perfect, Brittany whispered to herself, practicing the smile she had honed over 10 years. A smile crafted to be just warm enough that passengers would not complain, yet distant enough to remind them who held the power. But behind that flawless mask lay a twisted world. 10 years at Aurora Airways had made Brittany a master of instant judgment. With just a glance, she could read a passenger, deciding who truly belonged in first class, who would be trouble, who was worth catering to, and who was nothing more than part of the crowd to be controlled. She called it professional intuition. In truth, it was deeply ingrained bias, a dangerous habit she had nurtured into instinct. In Brittany's mind, first-class passengers were always white men in tailored suits, women carrying designer bags, or familiar faces from finance. Anyone else, especially people of color dressed simply, were out of place. And with just one arch of her brow, she could make them feel like intruders in a realm that was never meant for them. The frightening part was that the system had backed her. Victor Lang, the former CEO, once praised Brittany for her excellent professionalism after a turbulent flight. That single compliment made her untouchable, the darling of the company. From that day on, every complaint filed against her vanished. Her record spotless, her reputation as the model flight attendant grew brighter with each year. In reality, her colleagues knew the truth. They saw her sneer at black passengers as she checked their tickets 3 times. They saw how she brushed aside minor complaints, yet lit up with dazzling smiles when a wealthy passenger raised an eyebrow. They heard the whispers in cockpits, the arguments in crew lounges. But no one dared speak. Brittany did not just have skill, she had protection. This morning, like every other, the television in her living room buzzed with news of the merger between Aurora and Ether. 16 new international routes, fleet capacity up 30%. Brittany half listened, then waved it away. To her, changes at the top never mattered. In a decade, she had watched 4 CEOs come and go, 2 restructurings, and dozens of colleagues laid off. She remained. "I am untouchable," Brittany told herself, pulling her suitcase across the hardwood floor. "No one can touch me." Deep down, she did not think of herself as cruel. She believed she was just doing her job, that her strictness with certain passengers was to ensure security. But that belief had hardened into a dangerous shell, hiding the truth that she was discriminating and demeaning people based solely on how they looked. From the very start of her career, Brittany had absorbed a poisonous lesson. Whoever holds power defines the truth. And as long as her superiors protected her, she thought her actions could never be wrong. That morning, she looked into the mirror, studying the smile she had rehearsed thousands of times. A smile that once made passengers feel small, a smile that kept her colleagues silent. But Brittany did not know that in just a few hours, that smile would betray her. It would crack into a mask, shattered beneath the cold gaze of a man she never saw coming. She wheeled her suitcase to the door, unaware that today's flight would not be an ordinary shift. It would be a public trial for the warped belief she had carried for 10 long years. Chicago O'Hare buzzed like a hive in full frenzy. Passengers rushed with rolling luggage. Loudspeakers barked boarding calls, and waves of travelers surged toward departure gates. At gate C-22, Aurora Flight 157 to San Francisco was preparing to board. The air was chaotic but ordered, children bouncing with excitement, business travelers tapping on laptops, older passengers quietly clutching their magazines. At exactly 8:45, Brittany Hale arrived. Her uniform was sharp, her stride straight as an arrow, her eyes scanning everyone without pausing on anyone. She approached the check, in desk as if the entire space belonged to her. Jordan Chen, 31, her colleague with an easy smile, lifted a hand in greeting. Brittany only gave a curt nod, her face expressionless. In her mind, today was just another day of controlling the skies. Jordan held the manifest in his hand. Full flight. First class missing 1 seat. 2A. Passenger name, Andre Lawson. Jordan frowned slightly. The name was familiar, but he dared not say it out loud. Brittany glanced at the paper and smirked. Probably some businessman running late. They always think they're special. In the distance, Andre Lawson approached. No suit, no tie, just dark jeans and a navy shirt. His eyes took in everything. The frayed edges of the carpet, the outdated signage, the hollow smiles of Aurora staff. Every detail registered as a piece of the larger puzzle of a company with a rotting culture. When he stepped into the first-class lane, Brittany looked up. Her professional smile stiffened. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. With the unconscious reflex she had honed for years, she decided instantly. This man did not belong in first class. "I'm sorry, sir," Brittany said, her voice sweet but edged with steel. "Boarding for economy hasn't started. This line is for first-class passengers." Andre handed over his ticket, his tone calm. "I have a first-class seat. 2A. Brittany glanced at it, shook her head, and forced a smile sharp as a blade. There must be a mistake. First-class tickets don't look like this. She raised her voice, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. A few looked up, curious. Andre remained composed. "There is no mistake, this ticket is valid." His certainty carried weight, but Brittany pressed on. "I need to check your ID." He pulled out his license and set it beside the boarding pass. The documents matched perfectly. Still, Brittany's brows furrowed as though she could uncover a flaw. Around them, eyes began to focus, and more than one phone lifted discreetly to record. "This situation is unusual," she said with a sly edge. "Are you sure you're at the right gate, Mr. Lawson?" Andre nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I'm sure." The tension stretched taut, like a wire about to snap. A family in the economy line watched with uneasy sympathy. A businessman paused his call to observe. The air thickened, the entire gate area waiting for the spark. Brittany flicked her eyes toward Officer Patel, 30 Fas. 5. The security agent nearby. "Officer, we have a boarding issue here. We may need further verification." Patel stepped forward, his expression uneasy. He checked the documents, then said plainly, "Everything is in order, ma'am. This is a first-class ticket." Brittany's face froze, but instead of yielding, she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a warning whisper. "Sitting in the wrong cabin can be embarrassing, Mr. Lawson. I'm just trying to save you the trouble." Andre met her eyes. Calm, not angry, but his gaze cut straight through the mask. Slowly, firmly, he said, "The trouble does not come from me, Ms. Hale. It comes from the way you are treating passengers." A soft click echoed. A passenger had just hit record. And as if on cue, other phones rose. No one spoke, but everyone was waiting, watching the cracks begin to form in Brittany's carefully polished mask. Moments later, Colin Park, the 50-year-old gate manager, appeared. His eyes landed on Andre. The clipboard in his hand nearly slipped. There's no problem at all, Mr. Lawson. Please, go ahead." The name struck like thunder in the morning air. Andre Lawson, the new CEO of Ether Air. The true owner of Aurora Airways. Brittany froze. The blood drained from her face. 6 minutes of confrontation, and she had turned herself into the living embodiment of the culture Andre had come to destroy. She did not yet realize that the phones recording around her would become evidence for a verdict that could never be overturned. The air at gate C-22 was so thick it felt like a single breath could shatter it. When gate manager Colin Park spoke in a trembling voice, "Please, Mr. Lawson," the entire boarding area seemed to stop breathing. That name, Andre Lawson, cracked through the air like thunder. Brittany Hale froze in place. In her head, thoughts collided chaotically. Impossible. This man looks too plain. CEOs wear suits, have entourages, project power. But the panic and respect in Colin's eyes confirmed the truth she did not want to accept. Andre remained composed. He did not react like a man who had just been insulted. No anger, no arguments, no slamming documents on the counter to prove himself. He simply gave Colin a nod of thanks and turned to walk away. A simple gesture, yet heavier than any threat. The sound of his rolling suitcase echoed across the floor like a tolling bell. Andre passed Brittany, and she caught the faintest curve of his lips. Not bitter, not mocking, only cold, a silent reminder. I have seen enough. For a moment, it felt as though her legs had been nailed to the ground. Sweat gathered on her temples, her carefully applied makeup unable to mask her pallor. She tried to whisper, her voice raw. No, it can't be. But the words were only for herself. Around her, dozens of eyes had shifted. Where moments earlier they had looked at Andre with doubt, now every gaze turned to Brittany, sharp as blades. A few passengers shook their heads, some smirked. Worse still, at least 3 phones were raised, cameras trained directly on her face. Behind her, Officer Patel, who had just confirmed the documents as valid, took a step back, putting distance between himself and Brittany, as if to say, I want no part of this mistake. Andre stepped into the jetway. The watch on his wrist showed exactly 6 minutes since he had approached the counter. 6 minutes, brief in a lifetime, but long enough to expose an intra-Foucault rotten culture. He did not rush. Each step was its own declaration. I do not need to shout my power. I will let you reveal the truth yourselves. Behind him, Colin leaned close to Brittany, his voice breaking into a whisper. Do you know what you've just done? That man, he is the new CEO. The one who just bought Aurora. The one who holds all our futures in his hands. The word struck her like a bucket of ice water. She trembled violently. She opened her mouth to protest, but her throat was too dry. No sound came out. CEOs are supposed to look different, act different. It can't be. But Colin's eyes and the terror in his voice crushed every illusion. She staggered back, clutching the counter for balance. In her mind, images reeled. Every time she had been rescued by Victor Lang, every complaint that had mysteriously disappeared, every black passenger who left fuming, every colleague who stayed silent. All of it collapsed in one instant. Andre said nothing more. He chose silence, leaving Brittany to flail in the storm of her own panic. Because he knew, sometimes silence is the heaviest punishment. It forces the other to hear the pounding of their own heart, to feel the collapse echoing in their mind. At the end of the jetway, Andre glanced at his watch again. 6 minutes had passed. 6 minutes had revealed everything. Prejudice, arrogance, a system that protected the guilty. And those 6 minutes would mark the beginning of the storm he was about to unleash. Behind him, Brittany fell to her knees, whispering in despair. I just destroyed my entire career in only 6 minutes. As Andre Lawson stepped through the jetway, the first-class cabin welcomed him with soft golden light and the faint scent of premium leather. He sank into seat 2A, opened his tablet and pretended to read, but his mind lingered on the 6 minutes at the gate. Those 6 minutes had told him more than any internal report ever could. News spread like a lightning strike. A passenger at the boarding area had just uploaded the video, and within minutes, flight attendant Jordan Chen's phone buzzed with a headline. Aurora Airways viral clip. Flight attendant humiliates passenger. Turns out he's the CEO. Jordan's face paled. He had witnessed what happened at the gate, but now it was spiraling beyond anyone's control. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere shifted in subtle ways. Some passengers began whispering. A few glanced toward Andre, expressions of recognition flashing across their faces. Business magazines, financial headlines. Yes, they had seen him on a cover before. A middle-aged businessman nudged the person next to him, whispering, "That's him, the new CEO, the man who took over Aurora." In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds, 54, received the update from Jordan. He sighed heavily, his brow furrowing. "Today of all days, and Brittany's the one involved?" His voice carried the weight of someone who sensed a storm approaching. Meanwhile, Brittany Hale, just entering the cabin, felt the world collapsing around her. Colleagues who once avoided her eyes now looked at her with a mix of unease and caution. No one dared to speak, but the glances exchanged made it clear. She picked the wrong man to cross. Brittany tried to disappear into the galley, handing off the initial beverage service to Jordan. But the assignments had already been locked. Today, Brittany was the lead flight attendant in first class. That meant every key interaction with Andre Lawson would fall to her. Andre noticed. He saw Jordan carrying the drink tray instead of Brittany. He saw the forced smiles, the evasive eyes. He didn't summon anyone, didn't demand anything, only observed with patient silence. Because he knew the truth revealed itself most clearly when people thought they were hiding it. A passenger across the aisle, Leonard Pierce, 50. 5, a seasoned investor, leaned closer. "Mr. Lawson, isn't it? I read about you. What happened at the gate, disgraceful. To be honest, I've seen her act that way before." Andre gave the faintest smile, neither confirming nor denying, letting Leonard continue. In his mind, pieces of a larger puzzle were coming together. This was not a single incident, but evidence of a pattern. In economy, whispers raced through the rows. The CEO is on this flight. That blonde flight attendant, she's the one in the clip. Passengers leaned toward each other, eyes wide, some craning to peek past the curtain that separated first class. But for Brittany, it was different. In her chest, a dull fear had ignited into full-blown panic. Every laugh from a passenger, every hushed whisper, stabbed like a knife. Her hands trembled as she arranged meal trays, her breathing ragged despite her effort to steady it. "I just need to survive this flight. If only he lets it go. Just this once." Yet deep inside, another voice spoke coldly. "No, Brittany, he won't let it go, and no one is here to protect you anymore." Andre reclined, his gaze drifting across the cabin. He saw the tension clearly. Attendants dodging glances, passengers subtly turning their heads. He noticed Brittany trying to hide behind the curtain. He didn't call her. He let the fear gnaw at her, let the truth reveal itself slowly. not just to her, but to every crew member watching. The intercom announced preparations for takeoff, but instead of calm, the cabin felt like a bomb ticking under every seat. Everyone knew the real storm had only just begun. The first-class cabin settled into quiet after takeoff, the engines humming softly beneath the warm glow of the lights. But inside Brittany Hale, a storm raged. She stood in the galley, hands trembling as she arranged glassware. The faint aroma of coffee rose in the air, yet it could not mask the scent of fear seeping from her skin. Jordan Chen leaned in, his voice low. "You have to go out there. He's in 2A. Today's assignment is yours. There's no avoiding it." Brittany bit her lip until it bled. Every nerve in her body screamed to flee, but there was no escape. She took a deep breath, pulled the curtain aside, and stepped into first class. In seat 2A, Andre Lawson sat upright, eyes fixed on the tablet in his hands, fingers gliding across streams of data. When Brittany stopped at his side, he looked up. That gaze, calm, sharp, made her heart seize. "Good morning, sir," she forced out, her voice breaking. "May I offer you a pre-flight drink?" Andre paused for a moment, then replied softly, "Sparkling water." "Thank you." The request was simple, but his eyes never left her, piercing as though he could see straight through to her bones. Her hand shook as she poured, a few drops spilling onto the silver tray. Her smile was stiff, her panic impossible to hide. Setting the glass down before him, she clung to formality. "Is this your first time flying with Aurora, sir?" Andre's lips curved slightly, his eyes still locked on hers. "You could call it the first time, but I've become familiar with the company recently." The double meaning struck Brittany like a cold blade. She swallowed hard, lowering her eyes. But Andre did not let her escape. "Ms. Hale," he said, his voice steady but edged with steel. "I want to ask you a few questions about Aurora's customer service policies. When you have a moment." Brittany froze. It did not sound like a request, but a summons. No passenger had ever addressed her by her surname like that. And he wasn't asking about the flight. He was asking about policy itself. "Of course, sir," she murmured, forcing a smile. "Right after I finish service." Andre gave a small nod, his gaze following her every move as she turned away. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. A few passengers had overheard, glancing at one another with sparks of anticipation. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew an interrogation was coming. As Brittany continued service, Andre observed closely. He saw her warm and polite with white passengers, her tone light and courteous. But at seat 3C, where a black woman sat, Brittany suddenly became overly instructive, her manner shifting. The woman, smiling with quiet patience, said softly, "This is my first time in first class. My son bought this ticket for my birthday." Andre heard every word. He caught her eyes, then quickly noted it on his tablet. Brittany responded with feigned cheer. "Happy birthday, Mom." But the smile slipped as soon as she turned, revealing its hollowness. When Brittany returned to the galley, Leonard Pierce, 55, the investor seated across from Andre, leaned in and whispered, "I fly this route twice a month. That woman, Hale, She has a reputation. Many passengers have complained, but somehow no reports ever show up. Strange, isn't it? Andre gave a faint, cold smile, saying nothing. But in his mind, the puzzle pieces were snapping together. This was no isolated incident, but a clear pattern. In the galley, Brittany pressed her back against the wall, her heart racing wildly. She knew he was watching, cataloguing every detail. And this time, there was no Victor Lang to shield her, no connections to erase complaints. A single thought struck her, chilling her to the core. He doesn't need to raise his voice. He only needs to observe. And when the plane lands, the verdict will be delivered, 12:40 p.m. The wheels of the Airbus touched down gently on the San Francisco runway. A slight shudder ran through the aircraft, but to Brittany Hale it was the final knock on the coffin of her career. Her heart pounded, her fingers clutching the silver tray in the galley. She knew. The moment the wheels hit the ground was not just the end of a flight, it was the opening of a trial. While passengers gathered their belongings, Andre Lawson remained seated in 2A, calmly answering the flood of messages as his phone reconnected. A text from Naomi Adeyemi, Executive Vice President of Operations, read, "The clip is viral everywhere. Prepare for crisis management. HR and legal are waiting at the SFO lounge." Andre typed only 2 words, "Right on time." The cockpit announcement came over the speaker. "All Aurora Airways crew, please remain on board after passengers disembark for an urgent meeting." A ripple of whispers broke out. No one had ever heard such an announcement. Everyone understood. What happened at Gate C-22 was no longer Brittany's private problem. Passengers filed out, many casting glances at 2A. A few discreetly raised their phones, capturing the image of the CEO sitting motionless, his face unreadable. Leonard Pierce paused, leaning close to say, "Whatever you decide, many of us, your loyal customers, will stand with you." Andre nodded once. Change is coming, and today is only the beginning. When the cabin doors closed, the air turned into the silence of a courtroom. The crew exchanged tense looks. Brittany stood frozen in the galley, sweat soaking the back of her uniform. She whispered, "I need to apologize. Explain. Maybe there's still a chance." Jordan Chen's reply was a blade. "The more you explain, the more truth spills out. Best pray." The jetway doors opened. Security escorted the crew, along with Andre, to the VIP operations lounge. Brittany walked at the end of the line, her steps dragging like they were chained. Outside, passengers at the gate stared, their eyes stabbing into her like 1,000 needles. Inside the lounge, nearly 20 people were waiting. Aurora managers, the legal team, HR, and representatives from Ether. The silence was suffocating. At the head of the table, a large screen lit up at Andre's signal. The video from Gate C-22 played, Brittany's words echoing. "This line is for first class only. Perhaps you're at the wrong gate. I need to recheck your ID." Her face drained of color. She could feel dozens of eyes drilling into her. Andre Lawson rose, his voice low but resonant like a gavel strike. "Today I experienced Aurora as an ordinary passenger. And what I saw, what you all just witnessed on that screen, was not a mistake. It was a culture of rot, tolerated for years." He pressed a button. The screen shifted to a list. 17 complaints tied to Brittany over the last 3 years, most involving passengers of color, marked with notes: wrong ticket, invalid, suspicious behavior. Many flagged as escalated to management. "This is the parallel complaint system our ether integration team uncovered," Andre said, his eyes sweeping the room. These grievances didn't disappear. They were buried, and Ms. Hale is only the tip of the iceberg. Gate manager Colin Park stared at the floor. HR Director Elaine Morris stammered. "Some of those cases were handled at the executive level." Andre cut her off, his voice sharp as steel. "Which executive level? The former CEO, who protected a single employee until she became untouchable, while passengers and colleagues paid the price." The door opened. A man entered, Damon Reed, a former flight attendant who had reported Brittany 2 years earlier. His voice rang firm. "I was reassigned, then fired, just for telling the truth. Today I return, not for revenge, but to prove this system was broken from the very roots." Brittany staggered, tears blurring her vision. She stammered, "I only followed procedure. I just wanted safety." Andre looked directly at her. His words were deliberate, each one heavy as stone. "No, Ms. Hale, you did not act for safety. You acted from prejudice, and the system enabled you. But today, this ends." The room fell into a crushing silence. Brittany trembled, knowing the verdict hung above her like a blade. And this time, there would be no one left to save her. The room was steeped in silence. Every eye was fixed on Andre Lawson, the man who stood tall, his face composed, but his eyes burning with decisive fire. He looked at Brittany Hale one last time, then turned to the Aurora management team. "What happened today?" Andre began, his voice steady and resonant. "Is not just about a flight attendant. Brittany Hale is only the surface symptom. The real disease runs deeper, in the way Aurora allowed bias to become an unspoken standard, in the way complaints were buried, and in the silent complicity of an entire system." He pressed another button. The screen lit up with a flowchart of Aurora's internal complaint process. One branch was dimmed, marked with a note: "Executive handling only." Andre pointed directly at it. "This is the back door. Any complaint tied to Brittany was funneled here and vanished. Who allowed this? Who signed off? I want answers." Elaine Morris, the HR director, went pale. "Sir, that was a directive from the previous CEO. Mr. Lang wanted to keep the airline's image stable, so..." Andre cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. "Stable? You call that stability? Protecting prejudice, suffocating fairness, letting passengers be humiliated right in front of security? If that is the definition of stability, then Aurora was never worthy of existence." A ripple of unease swept across the row of managers. Colin Park stared at the floor. Others avoided each other's gaze. Andre paced slowly around the table, his voice lower now, but each word striking like iron. "Sky out, ether air, does not exist to paint over scars. We do not conceal, we cut out the rot. And from this moment forward, Aurora will be reborn, or it will disappear." He stopped, his eyes sweeping across the room. "Brittany Hale, you are terminated immediately. There will be no letters of explanation, no negotiation. Security will escort you out. Acts of discrimination, no matter how long they have been shielded, are exposed here today." Brittany collapsed into her chair, her face ashen as ash, her hands trembling so violently she could no longer hold her name badge. Every layer of pride and arrogance shattered. Andre turned to the management team. "But this does not end with one individual. 7 senior managers directly tied to the system that buried complaints, HR, customer service, flight attendant supervisors. All of you are suspended immediately pending investigation. If evidence of collusion is found, you too will be dismissed." A wave of horrified whispers rippled through the room. A few managers opened their mouths as if to protest, but when Andre's eyes swept over them, no one dared speak a word. He pressed on, his voice striking like a hammer. "Within the next 48 hours, I will establish a cultural reform task force. This group will review every past complaint and restore every file that was buried. Every employee who filed a report without response will be invited to be heard again. We will listen to every voice that was ignored." Andre raised his tablet, the screen flashing bold words. "Zero tolerance. No exceptions." This is not a slogan. This is law. Anyone who continues to harbor prejudice, who belittles customers or colleagues because of their skin color, gender, or background, understand that your career at Aurora ends the moment I find out. At the far end of the table, Damon Reed gave a slow nod, his eyes shining with renewed faith. Once a victim himself, today he saw justice being restored. Andre finished with a single sentence, deep and commanding, shaking the entire room. "We are not just changing a logo on the side of an aircraft. We are changing the soul of this airline. Aurora was once a sky of rot. From this day, it will be reborn under the name Ether Air. And in this new sky, every passenger belongs in first class." Silence filled the room once more, but it was no longer the silence of fear. It was the silence of an old era fading, making way for a new one that had just begun. 30 days after the meeting in San Francisco, Aurora Airways was no longer the same. The faded silver signs were being replaced with the red and gold logo of Ether Air. But the change was not only in the paint on the aircraft. It came from the way people in the organization looked at each other, treated each other, and served the passengers boarding every flight. At the training center in Chicago, more than 500 Aurora employees, from flight attendants and pilots to ground staff, sat in neat rows. On stage, Andre Lawson walked out, not in a power suit, but in a simple shirt. He smiled, but his voice carried weight. "Change has never been easy. Comfort does not always lead to progress. What happened at Gate C-22 was not an incident. It was a wake-up call for all of us. And today, we begin again, on a foundation of fairness, respect, and accountability." In the rows below, Jordan Chen sat in silence, listening. He remembered the look Andre had given him on the plane, the nod of encouragement when he chose not to remain silent in the face of injustice. Now Jordan understood clearly. Silence meant complicity, and he resolved that from this day forward, he would speak up for anyone treated unfairly. In another room, the buried complaint files were being restored one by one. Employees who had filed reports but never received responses were now being called in, heard, and assured that their voices would never vanish again. Damon Reed, the former flight attendant who had been pushed out of Aurora for telling the truth, was personally handed back his employee badge by Andre, along with a promise. "Your voice matters, and I am sorry it was ignored." 3 months passed. The media called the incident at C-22 the 6 minutes that shook the skies. The video spread across the world, becoming a symbol of fairness in aviation. Many passengers who had once faced discrimination now boldly shared their stories. Aurora, now renamed Ether Aurora, was not only rescued financially, it was reborn in spirit. Customer satisfaction scores soared by 27%. Applications from minority groups increased by more than 40%. The press called it the Lawson effect. But Andre only smiled, repeating his old philosophy: everyone belongs to the sky. On the official rebranding day at the launch ceremony, a massive banner stretched across the stage. Everyone belongs in first class. It was not an empty promise. It was the legacy of 6 decisive minutes. 6 minutes when a flight attendant believed she had the power to belittle someone. 6 minutes when a CEO quietly observed and decided to change an entire culture. That story became legend within Ether Aurora. Every new employee training program began with the C-22 video, a reminder that prejudice can destroy a career, and that just 6 minutes of misjudgment can bring everything down. Andre often continued his old habit of traveling incognito, but this time, when he sat beside an elderly black woman on a flight from Atlanta, he listened as she whispered, "I heard about the CEO who was humiliated and then changed an entire airline. He did what everyone wished for. Now I feel like I am truly welcomed." Andre smiled, his eyes warm. "And you will always be welcomed, because this sky belongs to all of us." In that moment, the legacy of those 6 minutes was no longer just a viral video, a PR crisis, or a sentence handed down to one individual. It had become a new standard, an unbreakable vow. No one will ever be diminished for simply being who they are. You have seen it. Just 6 minutes at Gate C-22 changed not only the fate of one person, but the very soul of an airline. From what seemed like a minor incident, Andre Lawson turned it into a fire that swept away prejudice and rebuilt a new culture. One where everyone belongs to the sky. But the question remains for you. If one day you were judged not by your effort or achievement, but only by your appearance or background, would you stay silent and endure? Or would you stand up and change the entire system? If this story resonates with you, hit like to show your support, share so others can see it. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next stories, where the smallest moments hold the power to shake the entire world. And leave a comment below. What would you do if you were in Andre Lawson's place? Because sometimes it only takes one person brave enough to stand up, to rewrite history.